Good morning and welcome to this special online service from Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena. I'm so glad that you're here with us this morning. I'm Omega Burkhardt, the senior minister of this church, and it is a pleasure to lead this service from the comfort of my office here on campus today. Neighborhood Church creates and grows an inclusive community of faith connected by love, spirit, and service. We acknowledge our presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tongva peoples, the traditional caretakers of this land and waters of this campus. With respect for the rights and wisdom of indigenous people, we acknowledge our harmful colonial histories and commit to decolonizing our own practices, to learning new ways of being in community and with each other, and in good relationship with the indigenous people of this land and with the land itself. Today's service is led by me with music director Dr. Zenaida Robles, Wells Lang, and the Neighborhood Choir. I have a couple of brief announcements for you. Recruitment for teachers and youth programs has begun. You've probably already seen the notices in our newsletters. If you're considering becoming a teacher or an advisor, we would love to hear from you. You can see the information in our newsletter about how to contact us, along with some common questions and answers. Also, just a reminder that next week we will have service online and in our sanctuary as we have a watch party for the General Assembly 2025 service that's coming from Baltimore. I'll be participating in it along with my colleagues, the Reverend Connie Simon and the Reverend Nicole Kirk. It will be a special service honoring the 200th anniversary of the American Unitarian Association, and we'll be in Baltimore where the historic sermon by William Ellery Channing was given 200 years ago that started this whole thing off for us. More announcements as well as our order of service can be found in the link in the Sunday email if you would like to follow along. This morning we gather virtually to further our discussion of the theme of freedom for this month. We kicked off the month of June with our Pride service. Of course, last weekend we had a wonderful service celebrating Juneteenth with our guest minister, the Reverend Mark Chase. And today we celebrate freedom as we gather and worship virtually from our homes. Since we're talking about the theme of freedom, I wanted to offer you this poem written by my colleague, the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Freedom has a rhythm to it, a longing our bodies know, she says. Without words, a movement away from everything small and scared, a waking up to possibility, healing backwards and forwards, even now as we are beginning again. Unafraid of this much mercy, tenderness, pleasure, we come to lean in, to learn the sound of liberation like the sound of our names, receiving and releasing. We come to be free, for more than ourselves, to call the greatest liberty, to sing of loyalty and courage and kindness, and to remember we are all doing the best we can. Despair hasn't gotten us yet, nor overwhelm, which is kind of a miracle, surrounded as much as we are by all of this beauty. Come, let us worship together this morning. I'll be lighting a chalice here. If you would like to light one at home, this is your opportunity. Otherwise, you can always just do this with your hands, is make a chalice and then light it by putting your thumbs together.
Breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out,
Good morning, everyone. For today's Time for All Ages, we are reading a story called Swimmy by Leo Leone. The story is about a little fish who is different from all the others. And when something scary happens, Swimmy has to be really brave and figure out how to help his friends stay safe. Today, we are talking about freedom and what that really means. Some people think that freedom and being free means doing everything by yourself. But Swimmy shows us that the best kind of freedom often happens when we work together, when we help each other and use everyone's ideas and talents. So let's read on and see how Swimmy helps turn a big problem into something powerful with the help of his friends. A happy school of little fish lived in a corner of the sea somewhere. They were all red. Only one of them was as black as a mussel shell. He swam faster than his brothers and sisters, and his name was Swimmy. One bad day, a tuna fish, swift, fierce, and very hungry, came darting through the waves. In one gulp, he swallowed all the little red fish, and only Swimmy escaped. He swam away in the deep, wet world. He was scared, lonely, and very sad. But the sea was full of wonderful creatures, and as he swam from marvel to marvel, Swimmy was happy again. He saw a Medusa made of rainbow jelly, a lobster who walked about like a water-moving machine, strange fish pulled by an invisible thread, a forest of seaweeds growing from sugar candy rocks, an eel whose tail was almost too far away to remember, and sea anemones who looked like pink palm trees swaying in the wind. Then, hidden in the dark shade of rocks and weeds, he saw a school of little fish, just like his own. "Let's go and swim and play and see things," he said happily. "We can't," said the little red fish. "The big fish will eat us all." "But you can't just lie there," said Swimmy. "We must think of something." Swimmy thought and thought and thought. And suddenly he said, "I have it. We are going to swim all together like the biggest fish in the sea." He taught them to swim close together, each in his own place. And when they had learned to swim like one giant fish, he said, "I'll be the eye." And so they swam in the cool morning water and in the midday sun, and they chased the big fish away. Swimmy was brave, wasn't he? But he didn't try to solve the problem all by himself. He had an idea, he became a leader, and he used his talents and everyone else's to come up with an idea that they could all work on together. Sometimes being free doesn't mean going off alone. It means using your special gifts with others to make something better, safer, and more joyful. When we share ideas, help each other, and stick together, just like Swimmy and his fish family, we can do amazing things that we often can't achieve all on our own. Thanks for listening. That ends our Time for All Ages.
Each Sunday, our congregation dedicates 100% of its contributions to a 501c3 organization or a neighborhood church-based social justice group that are making a difference in our community and the world. Each selected guest organization aligns with our community's missions and values and is nominated by church members who often are longtime volunteers and supporters of these change-making organizations. Today, for this special service, you can donate in a couple of different ways. After the short video that we're getting ready to show you, there will be a screen that has our texting information so that you can text to give. You can also donate by going to our website and clicking the button that says Give Pledge up at the top, and then scroll down to donations where you see the information for Sunday morning donations. This week, our gifts will go to support the Pasadena Humane Society with a special fund collected for saving some of the animals who were rescued during the fires here in January. Please watch this video and then see how you can give afterwards.
Abide with me. Fast falls the eventide. The darkness deepens. Still with me abide. When other helpers fail and comforts flee, help of the helpless, oh, abide with me. Swift to its close, ebbs out life's little day. Earth's joys grow dim, its glories pass away. Change and decay in all around I see. O thou who changes not, abide with me. We need each other every passing hour. Channels of grace and life affirming power. Faithful companions share this path with me. Through all our fears and hopes, abide with me.
For our reading this morning, I offer you this poem. It was first published on January 26th of 2025, so just a few short months ago. It's entitled Praise the Broken Promise of America, and it is written by Allison Luderman. Praise deep mineral veins under dirt, and fossilized remains of dinosaurs turning themselves into gas for our benefit. Praise the exhausted earth, miles and miles of subsidized corn and cattle lowing from their hellholes in automated milking barns. Praise farm workers rising before dawn, their sore backs and aching knees. Praise the myths that drew them here, stories eagerly consumed when there is nothing to eat but faith. Praise the courage of the reverend to look the dragon in the eye and preach mercy. Praise whatever hidden waterways are still pristine. Praise music that refused to play at the funeral of democracy and the killing cold that swept through Washington when the fake pope took power. Praise drag queens and lipstick lesbians and boys who are girls and girls who are lions and butch women wearing tool belts and all the music theater nerds who are even now building new passageways, mapping the next underground railroad and suiting up to be conductors. Oh, everybody get on board. This train will chug quietly across the Great Plains and over rocky Sierras into the desert where people still leave bottles of water and packets of food for the desperate who have always been the lifeblood of this nation. It will stop in obscure hamlets to pick up fugitives with tears tattooed on their cheeks and fraying backpacks overspilling with contraband books. Praise the weirdos, because if anyone can save us, it will be us. And praise all the glittering illusions we gawked at, ignoring our own neighbors in favor of a 24-hour peep show on the internet. Praise the convict firefighters on the front lines in LA, battling the insurmountable for $10 a day. We gambled our future for a hot air balloon with a hole in it. Praise our reckless hubris and the infinite distractions of the hall of mirrors we find ourselves in now. And bless our overwhelmed brains, scurrying like mice for shelter. Bless our collective rage and protect the officers who stood up on January 6th and now see their attackers roaming the streets like rabid dogs. Bless the animals we have always been in our coats and shoes and clumsy language. Bless our willful ignorance, so enormous, so world-altering that, like the Great Wall of China, it can be seen from outer space, where the gods are shaking their heads even now, in pity and in awe.
And
oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh freedom, oh freedom, oh freedom, freedom is coming. Oh freedom, freedom is freedom, freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, my freedom, freedom is freedom, freedom is coming. Freedom is coming. Oh yes, I yes, oh yes, I yes, oh yes, I yes, oh yes, I'm coming.
Monday afternoon, I gathered with a group of interfaith clergy members from all over the Los Angeles region. We had gathered at Grand Park for an interfaith gathering supported by CLUE, which is Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. We had gathered on the side of the park after having a series of speakers to inspire us. This was, of course, for calling for the release of David Huerta, who is the union president who had been imprisoned a few days before. The clergy gathered on the side of the park and we talked. We had a decision to make, and it was not an organized event for part of this day, but we felt like it was important to discuss whether or not we should show a presence as clergy closer to the federal building in support of those who had been detained there, and of course in support of the protesters who had been in confrontation with some of the police and National Guard that had arrived in the area. It was up to each one of the clergy members there whether or not we wanted to continue the participation for that day. It was not organized by anyone particular. It was a gathering of people coming together to show their support as people of faith. As we gathered in that space under the beautiful blooming trees, I asked myself, and I saw that my fellow clergy were asking themselves, what did it mean to be a part of this group? What did it mean to be public in this way? And what did it mean to be together in this work? Ultimately, each person had to make the decision to go on their own. And as probably not a surprise, most of us decided to do that. We gathered in prayer and in song, and we walked. It became very quickly that we needed each other in that work. We were there together, but we needed each other. We needed each other for support, for solidarity, and we needed each other because we were afraid. We were afraid. We were there to support other people who were in more danger. We were using our privilege, of course, and our bodies to be able to demonstrate the freedom that we believe that everyone should have. Now, this month, our theme of our services and our small group discussions has been around freedom. And I will admit that when I saw that topic come up in the list of themes for the year, I had a reaction. I had a reaction to the word freedom because I do believe it has been co-opted. It has been co-opted to mean, to represent values that I think are antithetical to my value system. And I wondered about that. I had to sit with that as I prepared this month for our conversations about freedom. Of course, we started our month with a fabulous Pride service. Last weekend, we invited Reverend Mark Chase to our campus for a service celebrating Juneteenth. And I think in all of these ways, we're showing up for freedom. We're showing up for what it means to be free. It doesn't mean being alone in this work. I think actually it means making a choice. It means having an intention to be in community with one another, because we can't do this alone. We have to be vulnerable with each other in this work, and we have to do it together. So this is apparent to me now more than ever that we have to work on these ways of showing up and supporting and taking turns, being vulnerable and being the helper. This is what makes us as individuals stronger, and it makes our communities stronger. I am reminded when I think about freedom and the choice to participate a bit of an epic scene in Lord of the Rings when Frodo begins his journey and all of his helpers, who wind up being his group that escorts him to do what he needs to do, they gather and they're all in, they commit to being all in. I also think about that story and how it's mostly about Samwise Gamgee, who was the steadfast friend and helper and companion. And it's those folks who make our collective journey successful. It makes us stronger, it makes us safer, and it helps us continue on a journey that we would not otherwise be able to do on our own. And I think that that is the essence of freedom. So I'd like to tell you a story in my life about freedom and accountability, about vulnerability, and about helpers along the way. This month in June, this is the anniversary of the completion for me of something very important, which is finishing the Camino de Santiago. I set out to hike the Camino de Santiago, which was a pilgrimage that I could not have predicted how important that would have been in my life. I set out on that pilgrimage with a bunch of different people who wound up being helpers in different ways. But there's one 24-hour period in particular that stands out to me as we think about freedom, as I hold these conversations about being helpers. One 24-hour period that really personifies or really describes this interaction, how we get through with help and with the grace of other people around us. On the morning of June 3rd, on that Camino pilgrimage, I had already been walking for a few weeks. I woke to the sound of my phone's alarm going off, and this was about 4 a.m. I was in a hostel. I had packed the night before as much as I possibly could, but I gathered my last few things very silently in the dark because people were still asleep around me. I had been doing this at this point every day. I knew how to pack the things away that I needed to in a way that was very careful, but this was a very early morning for me. I usually did not wake up this early. I packed my things on and put my backpack on, and I walked to the edge of town. Previously, I had been walking with groups of people, but that day I decided to go solo because I was going to be walking in to Santiago de Compostela on my own, and I wanted to be alone with my thoughts and the experiences as I did that. I immediately realized as I walked to the edge of town where we were staying what factor I had not taken into consideration in my very well thought out plan, which was darkness. I stood alone at the edge of town and I could see the path as it ended at the sidewalk and verged into the forest in front of me. There was an anemic light, a street light right there, and I stood there with my hands on my walking poles and those tips resting on the edge of the concrete, and I wondered if I could step out of that light and into the darkness of that forest. My dog is sitting with me right now. I was dumbstruck and I was afraid. I was a little embarrassed that I had not taken into account that the sun would not rise for a couple of hours. I had assumed that by getting up extra early, I would have that moment of solace. I didn't realize it was going to be a moment of solace on my own in the dark. I had walked hundreds of miles in the preceding weeks, and this was supposed to be the last day. I wanted to start jubilant, and instead I started a little bit scared. Now, what had happened is in the preceding days, on my walk, I had injured my leg. The group of 13 people I had started my journey with, some of them were Spanish students, students of mine. I also was walking with a professor from the university where I was at that time. And on that day, on June 3rd, my family was flying in from Milwaukee, my two sons and my husband, because it was my youngest son's birthday. So I was determined to get there on that particular day. And I had planned on walking on into the city with a cake to meet them. The excitement of seeing my family, the excitement of finishing that pilgrimage, all of that was tempered the day before when I realized I was facing what most pilgrims fear was, which was midday, halfway through the walk the day before, in the middle between two towns, somewhere in the 20 miles that I was supposed to walk that day. I had on my full backpack and my left ankle completely gave out. Now, I'd been suffering from an injury for several days, and in fact, it was a reoccurring injury, and so it was not a huge surprise to me, but I was really quite disappointed. Now, in previous days and weeks, I had plowed through that experience with ibuprofen and biofreeze and essential oils and massages and extensive taping, a little bit of brute force, probably a little bit of Spanish wine as well helped. But I was determined to finish the Camino walking. And when my ankle gave out the day before, I leaned over on those walking poles and they became my absolute support. Now, while I was walking on that day before with my injured ankle, Around the dirt path came an older woman. Now, she walked alone. She was walking at a slower pace than I would normally walk if I had been healthy. And she saw my tears and how I was leaning on my poles, taking all of my weight off of my ankle. She asked me in English if I'd like some moral support to keep the walking pace to make it to the next town. And I accepted. She introduced herself as Audrey from St. Louis, Missouri. And I gasped. Because my grandmother at that point had been deceased for over 15 years, and her name was Audrey, and she also was from St. Louis. And somehow, Audrey from St. Louis had found me to help me on my journey. Now, once I got over that initial shock, that moment of grace, we struck up a very amiable conversation, Audrey and I, as I limped into town, giving a lot of care to my ankle. We parted ways in that town, and I never saw her again, to be honest, but clearly I still think of her every day. Now, that evening in my hostel, I made the decision that I would get up at 4 o'clock the next morning and walk on my own into Santiago. I knew that my family would be expecting me. Other students and people I had planned to meet would be there as well. But as I said, I didn't take into account that leaving that early meant leaving in the dark. It meant leaving in the dark, and I had not packed any lights. I didn't expect to need any camping lights, although I am an avid camper. It just didn't occur to me. As I stood on the edge of that dark forest that morning, very nervously, a little panicky, a little bit ashamed in my lack of planning, I realized that I did have a light, and that was my cell phone. And I contemplated the risk of using all of the battery that I had from my phone to light my path, and then being lost in the forest with potentially a cell phone that didn't work. I decided the risk was worth it, and I plunged ahead into the darkness. The quietness and the darkness of the walk was at first a little discombobulating, but quickly my senses were awakened to the sounds and the smells, unlike at any other point during my walk so far. I could only see a few feet ahead of me, and I felt like I was being watched by animals. So I started talking quietly to myself so they would know that I was friendly. An absurd thought, but it made me feel better. I walked slowly so that I wouldn't stumble, and I was also using my walking poles almost as crutches at this point. I only had 6 or 8 hours left to go. Everything would be fine. I came to a small opening in the forest, and I could see how the moonlight of that very early pre-dawn, the moonlight was illuminating the path ahead of me. It was a moment of awe. And then suddenly I started hearing some soft voices. I heard them coming from behind me on the path, and that was my first indication that I was not alone in the forest. There were other humans there, and soon a shaft of light made its way through the thick trees behind me. And I stopped for a moment as the glare from a flashlight blinded me in the darkness, and I heard someone say to me, "Hola, buen camino," said a kind voice. A man and a woman, both well-equipped, unlike me, well-equipped with headlamps and flashlights. They had come to meet me on the trail. They were walking behind, and they saw that I did not have any lights, and that I was injured, and that I was walking very, very slowly. The woman, whose name I later found out was Angela, Angel, she offered to walk in the back with me, and then her husband would light our way with his flashlight and warn us of any large rocks or any dangerous parts in the path. Angela and her husband had decided to walk faster to Santiago that morning, and so they actually had caught up with me as well. And this was the culmination of 5 years for them of walking the Camino de Santiago in pieces. Now, later that morning on the trail, as the sun came up and I could see my way clearly, we parted ways, and Angela and her husband took off at a faster rate and made their way into Santiago de Compostela. For them, I knew this was a very important day. They were culminating this experience and getting their Compostela, which is the stamp on your passport. And for Catholics, this is tremendously important. This is a sign of a pilgrimage, a religious pilgrimage that would be the culmination of many Catholic people's religious lives. I walked on that day, that meaning really sitting in my heart of what it would mean to finish this journey, both for myself and all of the physical challenges, but also the religious and spiritual culmination of the journey. I walked the rest of the day slowly and very carefully, but I made it to the city by mid-afternoon in the blaring sunlight. I was hobbling and I was very dirty and I was tearful, but I was so grateful for the kindness of Audrey and Angela that journey. Two strangers who saw me struggling and they could not have done the walk for me, nor would I have wanted them to, but their help, their support allowed me to arrive on my own 2 feet. And yes, despite all of that, I did actually walk by a bakery and purchase a cake for my youngest son, carried it into the town, and met up with my family later that day. So here's the thing about helpers. In my case, in my story, neither Audrey nor Angela, neither of them could have taken my backpack. They could not have carried what I needed to carry, whether that was my sacred journey or the physical items that I needed for my journey. The learning experience for me was that I also had to ask for help and acknowledge my own vulnerability. I had to ask for that support, and then I had to receive it, and it was hard for me to do. It was hard for me at that stage. For those of you who are students of the Enneagram, there might be some of you watching. It's an assessment tool that helps us understand our vulnerabilities and our areas of strength, and I am an 8. I am an 8, which means my central manifestation of vulnerability is that I don't want to seem vulnerable at all. I want to feel like I have control over a situation and that I can help protect others who might be even more vulnerable than me. So you can see that in that early pre-dawn morning, when I stood at the edge of that dark forest and I realized I hadn't taken into account that late sunrise, I was at my most vulnerable. I was sweaty, my palms were sweaty, my stomach was upset, and I gazed ahead and I realized that I was not going to be able to do it without some help, but I didn't know where to find it. This is a feeling that I recognize in other areas of my ministry. It is a feeling that I felt as I stood arm in arm with other clergy the other day as we protected protesters from the military lines that were forming in front of us. Now, the other day, that solace came in the form of song as clergy gathered and we sang in an interfaith gathering of voices, which was quite beautiful. But as it turns out, we only have a couple of hymns in common. And so we sang This Little Light of Mine over and over and over again. And it was quite beautiful. I have learned in my life that I can't fix it all by myself, but working together in joy can make it better. And seeing that this week and seeing that in other points of my life has been a beauty and a lesson to me. And I hope that for all of you, you have also had moments of that experience. I think as we stand in these moments, in moments of profound change, as we stand on this cusp of what is an impenetrable forest in some ways, when we feel afraid and unprepared and vulnerable, these are the moments when we have to take a deep breath. We take a deep breath and we have to look up from the path that we're on and take in the singularity of the moment, even in those darkest of times. Take a breath and look around for the helpers. We have to look around for the helpers. I'm reminded of a quote by Anna Blvd. She says, what if freedom, instead of an impossible demand or a futurist fantasy, is what fluoresces as we turn toward one another? bearing witness and practicing withness, enfleshing the sacred through fierce and tender care, and practicing spirit as the wild love that makes possible what we are told is impossible. It is survival with joy and collective liberation. What if freedom meant that? I think that the ultimate goal of freedom, the ultimate expression of freedom, is to find the helpers, to be able to find the helpers, and in turn to be a helper when we are able. Freedom doesn't mean that we are divorced from caring, that we are able to do whatever we want without consequences. Rather, I think and believe that freedom is knowing that sometimes you shine the light on the path for someone else, and that another day in the darkness of very early dawn, you might need the light and someone will be there to shine it for you. For our benediction this morning, I share with you these words from my colleague, the Reverend Audette Fulbright. Did you rise this morning broken and hungover with weariness and pain, and rage tattered from waving too long in a brutal world? Get up, child. Pull your bones upright, gather your skin and muscle into a patch of sun. Draw a deep breath into your lungs. You will need it, for another day calls to you. I know you ache. I know you wish the work were done, and you, with everyone you have ever loved, were on a distant shore, safe and unafraid. But remember this, tired as you are not alone. Here and also here, there are others weeping and rising and gathering their courage. You belong to them. They belong to you, and together we will break through and bend the arc of justice all the way down into our lives. May it be so.
you.